Hey folks, sorry I'm late.
Hey everyone.
Welcome everyone. As always, if you could record your attendance in the notes doc, which I just pasted in the notes meeting, and a reminder that we'll abide by the Linux Foundation Code of Conduct for this meeting. If you have any agenda items, please add them. Nothing was added so far, so it might just be a short meeting. So I could briefly give an update. The spec 1.0 change 530 pull request 536, which splits requirements by party. Several of you reviewed that, so thank you very much. And that was submitted. As we mentioned before, it's full of to-dos, but now we have that and we can make kind of like incremental progress on tracking them down. Here I could present just so you see. You can see what I'm talking about. That's this one where it looks like this, where we have this table. So that was submitted. Again, we could do pull requests to fix individual things on there. The Provenance 1.0 spec, I submitted a small change because there was a question about exactly how to, this is maybe bike shedding here, exactly how to format parameters of like, is it an array of objects or an object of arrays? And we kind of have, where's that comment? We have three different kind of attributes that we want to slice by, or four. There's called disposition, for lack of a better word, of like, is it coming from outside or is it something set by the build system internally? And the reason why we care about this is because the external ones we have to, in the SLSA, we have to check because they're set by users and we want to verify that they're safe. Within the system, we're generally trusting those. And so it's useful probably to split it at a high level, because then there's like one thing of things that you have to set at a certain build level and one thing that you don't. Then by type, is it a reference to an artifact or is it just a raw string value? And then some sort of name, just a unique identifier just to differentiate between them, and then the actual value. So I don't think it's probably worthwhile to spend the time here, but I just wanted to mention that this is the only real update since last time. If you have any thoughts on it, I think opinions would be welcome to try to get past. We have, I think there's like 3 different options that I have different commits. And if it's unclear like where in the pull request to find the thing, just let me know and I'll do it. But here's like the examples that I have in this last comment. Otherwise, I think, other than that, there's most of the comments I think have been mostly resolved or just have like little to-dos. And so I think that the biggest part is cleaning up the pull request to like make the documentation more clear, not have documentation spread across multiple files, but make sure it's like actually in Markdown, things like that. So I hope to do that over the next couple weeks, but it's been I've been a little bit busy with other things for my job, so I haven't been able to spend a lot of time on that. If there's anything anyone want to discuss now, I'm happy to do it, but I'm not sure. There's no updates since last time. And with that, I'll hand it off to Chris.
Yeah, so I've been drafting the spec for how to verify build level 3 systems. It's almost done. I'm putting the final touches on, and it's in Google Doc format. I'll be posting it to issue 508 this afternoon. So please read, give feedback. This is my first foray into spec writing, so I need input. Thank you.
If it would be more useful to get feedback on the Google Doc before you do the Markdown translation, then I think most people will be open to doing that. If you wanted to share a link to your doc in the issue, we've done that a few times before with different things.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. I'll put the doc there with comment permissions to the internet.
Cool.
Yeah, and as I mentioned to Chris before, in case anyone else is in the same boat, there are tools to automatically convert from Google Docs to Markdown. So like, don't do it by hand. And if you can't find a tool, just contact me, and I'm happy to give a, either do it myself or give a link. We have one within Google, but I think it might just be Google internal. I don't know if it's publicly available, but either way, it's it saves all that pain. And generally, receiving comments on Google Docs is way better than receiving comments on Markdown on GitHub code reviews. Way better meaning easier for both the author and the reviewer. Oh, I see someone added something for specification changes. Maybe that was Arno. I don't know if he's here.
Yeah, that's me. Hi. I mean, if we have time, I wouldn't bother the whole group with this, but I thought there was an interesting question that came up from our interaction, which is what I was trying to link to specifically. It's there at the bottom, actually. So for those who haven't seen this, I kind of took a stab at putting together a page that defines different stages for the development of specification so that we can communicate clearly what stage the spec is, whether it's in basically being worked on, it's we are asking people to review it, or it's stable. That's the stages. And then there is the last one is kind of meant to be, okay, end of life kind of thing. And what came out of this is, in my proposal, I had thought we just retire them, and there may be different cases which lead to retiring a spec. And the main two are, we have updated the spec with a new version altogether, or we abandon it. We can imagine at some point we're working on some document and then we say, you know what, let's forget that one, let's start over, or something like this. And so it doesn't have to happen. But and so what Mark, you said is, wait, I don't know that just because we're releasing a new version, we would want to retire the previous ones. And I thought that was an interesting question. Do we really want to entertain the idea that we are maintaining several versions, and then people, we are letting people, I don't want to say believe, but we are actually saying it's okay to stick with an older version. That's basically what I'm trying to say. And so just to give you the context, and I apologize, but to bring that up back, my background is in Directory C mostly, and where of course the specifications are called recommendations. So it quickly became obvious that there were things we didn't want to recommend anymore because they were old things. And so if there's a HTML5 spec, you don't want to recommend people to do HTML4 anymore. And so we said, okay, we're going to retire HTML4 once HTML5 is out. And this is what we want people to use. So my expectation was here we would have something similar. Let's say you had SLSA 1, you don't want people, or if you say, let's say there's a SLSA 2 and there was a SLSA 1 before, do we really want people to still use 1? Or do we want to say, no, 1 is retired, people should really move? Of course, it doesn't mean everybody's going to move overnight, and maybe people might stick with the old one, but it's a matter of how we want to communicate this. So Mark, go ahead.
Actually, Josh, if you want to go first, go right ahead.
I was just going to say that I've been thinking about this a bit today, and I'm kind of torn. Like, I don't think we want to recommend people like continue to use older versions of the spec, but neither do we want to make people feel like they have to move quickly, especially thinking about like a lot of the changes we're making are more about clarification than about change of recommendations. And especially for the provenance format, I think this notion of like outdated but still functional is appropriate. So we've seen a few folks adopt SLSA provenance and implement SLSA requirements, and I don't think that it's strictly necessary that they should update to a newer provenance version, for example, when SLSA 1.0 comes out.
All right, thanks. I'm going to interject, Mark. Excuse me. It's just because I realized one thing. Just because we only have one stage called retired for both obsolete and abandoned, doesn't actually mean we cannot have two versions in stable stage, right? We could have two different versions that we keep in stable status, which means that you can actually maintain two different versions at the same time. When we retire one, it's completely up to us. We don't have to retire SLSA 1 when we publish SLSA 2. So in fact, we have more freedom than I was thinking. So go ahead, Mark. I don't know if that changes your mind too, but.
Yeah, I guess my main comment on this was because it said like should no longer be used, which I thought was perhaps an overly strong statement. It's a little bit nuanced, like you said. There's also, I actually forgot, I was actually thinking that we have two types of specifications. One is like a literal format, right? And then like the provenance format. And there, I think we actually might want to recommend people upgrade. I think we have text saying that of like, don't bother upgrading between 0.x versions, but you probably want to upgrade to 1.x, 1.0, whenever that is stable. So there we might want to have some wording of like new implementations shouldn't use that. For the other spec, I don't know if it's the same or if it should be softer. Maybe if we have some sort of language, I think what we want to get at is that like it's still a valid specification, but new implementations shouldn't use it. And old ones, or people who are currently using it, should consider upgrading, I guess, right? Something like that. Anyway, I think Sean was next.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that in terms of what Joshua was saying about making people who have already implemented the 0.2 version of the provenance spec. I think it would be useful to at least call out that the provenance spec is something that we are working on, rather than have that become a shock when 1.0 comes out. So maybe on the existing pages, being able to call out, just give people a heads up who aren't kind of part of this group and aren't kind of actively watching the changes in the repo, that it might be worth, heads up, this is going to change. And I think there's some significant changes in the provenance format, especially in terms of the layout that we're proposing. So I think it might be good for people who are kind of watching this more at the surface level to call out the fact that we are actively working on the provenance format. I know there's documentation in there that says stuff about, expect things to change, and once we commit to 1.0, we will not be making so many breaking changes, but there's a kind of fairly rapid iteration happening on the provenance format. So it might be worth trying to just call that out on the page that we've got.
Yeah, and in fact, just to add to this, to respond to this, is the the proposal I put together. There's this notion there are some stages that are well defined, but the spec itself, the documents will have a status section at the beginning, and the proposal is to actually have it on every page. That not only links to the definition, but also that allows us to communicate any additional information we want to. So if at some point we're working on another spec that we are getting too close to, being published, where we want people to eventually move, we can always update that section and say, hey, watch out, be aware there's this in the works. So I don't know who's next, Joshua or Brian.
I'm going to lower my hand because I was basically going to make the point that Mark's just written about whether it, even because it's old and valid, doesn't mean we maintain it, and there being a distinction between those.
Yeah,
So,
that's a good point too.
Go ahead, Brian.
Said that.
I was just going to comment that perhaps maybe instead of like version 1 and version 2, there's some notion of connecting these version releases with a date. I mean, compliant with SLSA level 3 version 1 sounds pretty great, unless you know that version 5 is out, right? So I don't know, maybe there's a way that we can express that the version that someone is claiming is 3 years old.
Yeah, that's a different, indeed, that's another question that's kind of orthogonal to the status, but yeah. I'm afraid on that front, you're going to find people with opinions on either side. I mean, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, on the date one, I've kind of gone back and forth, especially because if we're not doing like regular releases of like every year, then it might just be the 3 years actually is the most recent one. Or it could be 3 versions back. I don't know. I don't have an opinion on that. One suggestion actually is that right now the spec, the pull request defines abandoned of like a spec that we started and then dropped. I'm not sure we need it. We could leave it off for now. Of like, I don't anticipate that happening. And then when it does happen, we could define it then.
That's fine.
But either way, I feel like that I would split that out, either not define it or not make it part of the outdated thing.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, also in terms of like saying that there's a new one coming, should we use the status field for that or just communicate it in some other way? I don't know.
Well, we have a website, we can use different ways for sure, but and maybe not just one way. If it's important enough, we want people to be aware and not miss it.
Yeah, because I've already had people. I think that's a really good point. I think whoever says that, Sean, I guess. Because I've already had several people like be unaware that the new ones are coming. I think that's
I can imagine that being really useful when we open for comments as well and change it to, then we can actually proactively link to the newer version and say, like, take a look and leave some comments.
Yeah. For the purpose of resolving this, does it sound like, so far we have, just to summarize in case anyone hasn't thing. Working draft where it's like rough, in review where it's like basically ready for review, stable where it's like the latest version and stable. And it sounds like we'll want one more that's like outdated or something like that. That says it is, still valid, but no longer maintained, and it's recommended to upgrade to the new one, something like that. Does that sound like what the consensus is?
So I still like the term retired more because, and I'd rather, refine the definition of it, because this is something that's in our control, that at some point we make a decision, we retiring the spec. While outdated, it kind of happens, it feels like you're not really, making that decision. It just happens over time.
Does something become retired immediately upon the next version existing, or are there two stable ones?
No, that's exactly what I was trying to say earlier, is that we don't have to do that at all. We are in control of that status field on the spec. So we could have two different versions or n versions that are stable, and would they stay there? And it's entirely up to us to go and say, okay, now we're going to retire that one. We really feel like people should no longer use this.
What about superseded with which two people just suggested?
Yeah, we can do that. I mean, yes, I think that would work too. Again, it depends. The idea of the retired was because it was encompassing different possible scenarios. When you say superseded, it means you can't use this for anything else other than the case where it is superseded by another spec. So especially if we were to abandon it. And I know it's, it may never happen, but it happens more often than you think. So you never know. But because you could, you have to think this is not like, like the whole SLSA spec, maybe we would never abandon it, but you could have, smaller specification at some point. We say, oh, let's have a spec that you start publishing this, people see it, and then you say, oh no, you know what? Or we should reformat this and merge it with another one or whatever. And then what happens to that spec? It's like, well, people may have linked to it and whatnot. And you want to say, you know what? This is a dead end, don't go there anymore. And so that's why the retired with the, this notion that you could abandon the spec was kind of what I was thinking. But we could have different status if you prefer and call them out explicitly. That's totally reasonable.
Any opinions? I think that argument makes sense to me. Or no, I'm okay with retired.
Anybody feels strongly about this, that we're doing something wrong here?
I don't have very strong opinions. I just have the kind of the Python PEP and the Kubernetes KEP terms are more familiar to me. So they used to use superseded in Python PEP, so switched to replaced to indicate that there's like a more up-to-date thing you should use instead. But I don't have a strong feeling.
No, but so that's a good point in terms, but I mean, again, we have this section you put, you can say retired and then you explain why, right? And this is where you can say it has been retired because there's this newer version you should be using. It's been superseded. You could use that in the section below. Or you can say, no, it's been abandoned because it's been merged with another spec. Anything like this could be in the section that goes with the status. But yeah,
I mean, does IETF call things historic? Is that the term?
I don't know, actually. You will find, this is the problem is everybody reinvents those things. So then we're doing the same here.
Okay, so in terms of next steps, I suggest that we add, if anyone has any opinion one way or the other, even if it's mild, say so on the doc. And I think, as one of the approvers, I'm fine deferring to Arno to make the decision at all. All of them sound okay to me. So why don't we let you record opinions in the pull request?
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Any other opinions welcome. Suggestions. Best is, you say exactly what text you would like.
Yeah. My suggestion is just to clean up the paragraph instead of should no longer be used, but a little bit more nuanced of like it's still valid but won't be maintained, and etc. And recommending using the newer
Yeah.
version.
Yeah, that part I can do the change, which is what Brendan was suggesting, to change no longer be used to no longer maintained. That's an easy one. I don't think anybody is going to get upset with that change. And, like everything else, those things are not cast in stone, right? We can always improve on it. So let's not get too worked up about it. It's just in Git, right? It's like we can update it.
Sounds good. Any other
Thank you.
topics?
That's it for me.
Okay, doke. All right, well, good seeing everyone, and I'll talk to you online or next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks.